I used to think the phrase energy vampire was exaggerated, a metaphor, something people said when they were simply tired or overwhelmed. I believed exhaustion came from work, from stress, from life itself. I didn't realize that sometimes the deepest fatigue doesn't to come from what you do. It comes from who you allow into your inner world. There are people who do not simply share space with you. They drain it. They absorb your attention, your empathy, your emotional stability, and leave you feeling hollow without ever raising their voice. And by the time you notice what is happening, you're already running on empty. He thought he understood his mind, but what he didn't to know was that a resource existed that could help him rebuild his life. You will find it in the description and comments. At the time, I didn't know I was dealing with something deeper than difficult personalities. I only knew that every interaction left me exhausted, anxious, and strangely disconnected from myself. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I needed to be more patient. Maybe this was just what relationships required: emotional effort, constant support, endless understanding. But slowly, a pattern emerged. Certain people always needed something, always had a crisis, always had a complaint, always had a problem that only I seemed responsible for absorbing. Conversations were never balanced. My experiences were background noise. My boundaries were inconveniences. My exhaustion was irrelevant. The focus always returned to them, their pain, their needs, their narrative. And when I tried to step back, even slightly, I was met with guilt, disappointment, or emotional pressure. Isn't it strange how some people make you feel selfish simply for wanting to breathe? The first time I recognized something was wrong was not during conflict, but after silence. I would leave a conversation feeling heavier than when I entered it. My mind would race. My chest would tighten. I would replay everything I had said, wondering if I had done enough, if I had been supportive enough, if I had failed in some invisible way. That is the signature of emotional extraction. You don't leave feeling connected, you leave feeling consumed. These were not people who listened to me. They fed on my empathy, on my attention, on my need to be understood. And without realizing it, I was offering them unlimited access. One of the most painful realizations came when I noticed how my mood changed depending on who I was around. With some people, I felt lighter. With others, I felt drained, even when nothing dramatic had happened. There were no arguments, no shouting, just an invisible weight that followed every interaction. I began to see how certain personalities operate: constant negativity, subtle victimhood, emotional dependence, chronic dissatisfaction. They don't attack your body. They occupy your mind. They create emotional gravity that pulls everything toward them. And over time, you begin to orbit their needs instead of your own life. What made it even more dangerous was how normal it seemed. Society praises self-sacrifice. We are taught that caring means giving endlessly, that empathy means absorbing pain, that being a good person means always being available. But there is a line between compassion and self-erasure, and I had crossed it without realizing. I was not supporting people. I was sustaining emotional systems that depended on my exhaustion. The breaking point came quietly. One night, after another draining conversation, I realized I felt empty in a way sleep could not fix. My body was tired, but my mind was worse. I felt disconnected from my own needs. My thoughts revolved around other people's problems. My emotions felt like tools instead of experiences. And I asked myself a question that changed everything. Why am I always depleted after giving? Why does connection feel like consumption? In that moment, I finally allowed myself to see the truth. Some people don't share energy, they take it. That realization was not about blaming others. It was about reclaiming myself. I began learning about emotional boundaries, psychological dependence, and toxic relational patterns. I learned that so-called energy vampires are not mystical beings. They are people who unconsciously or deliberately regulate their emotional state by draining others. They seek constant validation, attention, reassurance, or control. They feel empty inside, and instead of facing that emptiness, they fill it with other people's emotional resources. And if you are empathetic, reflective, or compassionate, you become an easy source. Defending myself did not mean becoming cold. It meant becoming clear. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped absorbing emotions that were not mine to carry. I limited how much I engaged with negativity. I began choosing when to listen, when to step back, and when to protect my inner world. I learned that not every story needs my emotional participation. Not every crisis is my responsibility. Not every person deserves unlimited access to my energy. And slowly, something incredible happened. I felt like myself again. Of course, there was resistance. When you change the dynamic, those who benefited from the old one often react. Guilt appeared, accusations of distance, subtle attempts to pull me back into the familiar role of emotional provider. But I stayed grounded, not aggressive, not dismissive, just intentional. Emotional self-defense is not cruelty, it is self-respect. Rebuilding after years of emotional depletion takes time. I had to relearn what it felt like to rest without guilt, to say no without explanation, to choose silence without fear. I had to untangle my worth from how much I gave. I asked myself hard questions. Why did I believe I had to earn connection through exhaustion? Why did I confuse empathy with self-sacrifice? Why did I ignore my own limits for so long? And instead of judging myself, I chose understanding. Because being drained does not mean you were weak. It means you were human in environments that consumed humanity. Today, when I reflect on the idea of energy vampires, I understand it differently. It is not about labeling people as monsters. It is about recognizing patterns that damage the mind, chronic emotional dependence, manipulation through guilt, one-sided relationships, and the quiet expectation that your inner world exists to stabilize someone else's. You cannot change those patterns in others, but you can change your participation in them. At the end of his journey, he discovered guidance in a resource that helped him face anxiety and rebuild his life. You can access it too. The link is in the description and comments. Healing is not dramatic. It is choosing yourself in small, consistent ways. It is protecting your emotional energy as something sacred, not something disposable. And when you finally stop allowing others to live inside your mind without permission, something extraordinary happens. The exhaustion fades, the clarity returns, and you remember who you are beneath the noise. True freedom begins in the mind and only then appears in life. If this story resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and continue this journey with us as we uncover toxic minds and rebuild stronger ones together.